Welcome to Suffolk Matters, where all of Suffolk County meets the men and women of Suffolk AME. News, opinions, and insights you won't hear anywhere else. Here's your host, the president of New York's largest independent union, Suffolk AME's Dan Levler.
Welcome to another edition of Suffolk Matters on Walk 97.5 and 94.3 The Shark, where Suffolk County meets the men and women of Suffolk AME. News and views you can't hear anywhere else. So my guest this morning is Michael Durso, and he's candidate for New York State's 9th Assembly District. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning. How are you, sir?
Another fine day. I mean, what an interesting year all around for many, many reasons. But you're running for New York State's 9th Assembly District. And
Correct.
I guess first and foremost, I want to ask the question, why are you seeking office? And I don't mean that in who in their right mind would do that? What goals and initiatives? I think that leadership is just such a unique quality in people, and when people step up to get involved, that's just a great thing for their community. But your specific values.
Sure. Again, it was kind of like you said. I get broached with that a lot, where people say, "Why are you doing this?" Almost to say I'm crazy. But I think it's such a great opportunity. Like you were saying, I think it's such a great opportunity to be completely involved in the community. And to tell you the truth, specifically for me, I hope to become a voice for the working class here on Long Island. I'm bringing that to Albany. I really like to bring some accountability, really availability to the residents as far as an elected official is concerned. Some of our elected officials, I feel, they forget why they're there and who elected them. The people elect them, and that's who you work for. I really feel a lot of them forget that. It's not the other way around. Elected officials, if I'm lucky to become one, you don't work for us. We work for you. You're put in that position to help people. And I really feel like I could bring that to Albany, bring that to the state, our district. I do. I feel too many politicians really believe it's all about them, and I'm not really made that way. I feel we really need to start taking a look at the people that we elect, especially locally. Local elections are so important, and start putting people in office that have the people's agenda on their mind, not their own. And I think that, in all honesty, that their districts and the people in the district these days, walking door to door, meeting people, they feel like people that are elected officials, as they call politicians, have their own agendas in mind, and that's not what I'm about. I'm about people. I'm about the working class. I'm about everybody here on Long Island, and hopefully trying to make the district and the island better for our residents that live here.
Michael, you're so right. Elected officials, they serve at the will of the people, right? And constituent services is I guess the inside term that maybe not everybody, thinks about and speaks about in that way. But it's that concept of, I'm here as a representative of the people in my district. It's not, I convince everybody in my district that I'm a good guy, and then I go off and I do whatever I want. It's I'm their voice. You're putting yourself in the position, speaking on behalf of the people in your district. It's not your agenda.
Correct. And that's how I grew up. That's how I work. That's how I'm, in my current job that I'm in now. It's supposed to be about the residents. It's supposed to be about what's right, what's supposed to be done by them. Now, listen, are we going to disagree on certain things at certain times? Of course. I mean, if everybody agrees with you all the time, we'd all be crazy. But having the best intentions for the residents, being available to them, to speak with them, to hear their issues, let the residents have a seat at the table and decide what they need in their district and be there for them. Be available to them as a person, not as, I hate the word constituent. I just feel like it's so impersonal.
It sure is.
They're residents.
Yeah.
They're residents. They're people. And they have needs and they have issues like we all do. And my job, if I'm an elected official, is to represent them and try and help them, everybody within the state and especially in the district, to what they need and get back on track and get them the help they need. And that's what I'm hoping I can do.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a lot of work. I know it sounds simple, but, to take in everyone's values, understand those values, and then go out and advocate for that is actually a lot of work. So, what you're proposing to do, I believe that's what, when people are voting, that's what they're hoping they're going to get. Exactly what you're describing.
Absolutely. And I mean, you hear that all the time. People say, a lot of people go in with the best intentions, which I believe is true.
Sure.
but I also think I come from a different mold, a different type of person. I'm a working class person. I work 2 jobs. I get what it is to live on Long Island, pay your taxes, struggle a bit. I have 2 young girls. I want to do the best for them. So sometimes we really have to work hard to give our children, our families, the best that we can. And the majority of the people, let's be honest, on Long Island are doing that. As far as an elected official, it's a great stat. But 53% of the voting population, 53% that live on Long Island, come from a working class background, right? They're blue collar workers. They come from that background, and only 4% of all legislators elected come from that background, which is really is a crazy statistic if you think about it. And they always talk about, how can you know what I need if you don't know me? Well, I come from the same background that 53% of our population comes from. So I think that I could help. I think I could help everybody. Don't get me wrong, but the working class, the people that go out and work every day and put on a uniform or put on a pair of jeans and work boots and all across the island, whether it's a municipal worker, whether it's our police, whether it's our fire department, they need a voice. I could go and represent them, and we need more people in legislative positions that represent that segment of the population.
Yeah, you're not wrong on those statistics, and it's really, it's a stark way of looking at, that skew between, when you look at the concept generally of, who's going to be my voice in this political arena, you want somebody that woke up and went through what you went through, not someone that lived such a vastly different life they wouldn't even understand your struggles. So, and let's, I guess let's get into a little bit of your history, right? So you have been a member of 2 different unions, CSEA Local 881 and Teamsters Local 553. So, why don't we talk a little bit about, what kind of work did the folks in CSEA Local 881, what did they do?
So I'm working for the town of Oyster Bay here on Long Island. Local 881 is our local here with CSEA, which represents the municipal workers of Oyster Bay. That's everything from the sanitation department, where I am, through the P&D, Parks Department, Highway Department, basically anybody that works for the town that's not an elected official and or appointed positions such as deputy commissioners. So it's a wide range of our workforce that's here. And then also with the Teamsters, I'm a public safety officer at Hofstra University at night. So like I said, 2 jobs, work day and night. But Local 553 obviously represents the public safety officers at Hofstra University, along with other entities like some delivery drivers, people that work for the Brooklyn Navy Yard. As far as the security there, some of their work is there. So it's really a vast variety of workforce that the 2 unions represent, and obviously one of them being in the public sector and one more being in the private.
Sure, and in a way, the folks of AME, we consider ourselves, using the term wall-to-wall bargaining unit, in which there are over 900 different titles, different jobs that people could be hired into and do on behalf of the residents of Suffolk County. And it sounds like, you have that very similar experience inside of government.
Absolutely. Through CSEA, I was actually a shop steward for a while within the sanitation department as a worker. When I was working, I worked on the back of a truck for over 10 years. And then when I tested out and became an inspector in the sanitation department, obviously, you're not going to be the shop steward in that department because you're definitely more of a management position. But I think it gives me a great understanding of both levels of a municipal government and what the needs are of both the workers and the management and the residents, to tell you the truth. Because being an inspector, I speak almost strictly with residents and business owners on a day-to-day basis. So understanding their needs and what they need in the town that I live in and work in, I think it's been a great asset to learning more about the municipal government and how it works. And then obviously with the Teamsters, I was on the bargaining unit for both through our contracts with CSEA and the Teamsters Union. And I think being on the bargaining unit, obviously, as you know, it is a great way, and it definitely teaches you a lot about what both sides need, what both sides expect, and where you could come to some kind of agreement in the middle to what works for everybody and makes everybody happy, keeps everybody safe, keeps everybody paid, and makes the residents, as I always go back to, the residents of the municipalities of let's say Hofstra University, where our students are residents essentially, keeps everybody on the same page and does what's best for everyone.
No, that's a fair point, and just, another point in your history, I have yet to meet, and we go through a rigorous screening process when we do endorsements for candidates, and there's yet to be a candidate that came in that didn't say they had some sort of, union affiliation on some level or whatever. But I would say it's fair to say that you came from a very union household.
Yes, it's safe to say that.
Yes, yeah. So in that way, how do you feel like that shaped, your involvement, obviously, in the workforce, and then, that value set that maybe you picked up at home, and how that'll apply in Albany?
Yes, well, in case anybody doesn't know, my father, John Durso, was the president of Long Island Federation of Labor and the president of Local 338. He represents, again, a vast variety of people, workforces, and growing up in that house. I mean, the first thing is this, obviously, growing up in the Durso household, especially growing up where my father was a union man through and through. I mean, he started out working at a deli counter and working in a freezer in a warehouse. So that idea of hard work, working your way up, putting in a hard day's work, having accountability was something that was really molded into us and pushed into us to understand, for me, my two brothers and my sister, about working and what it takes to get up every day and go to work. And then again, obviously he moved his way up through the ranks and got involved with the union and did that to represent people in a way that we all believe. And then my mother, on the other side of it, was also a CSCA member at the town of Oyster Bay for over 20 years, and then went out and opened her own business, opened up a restaurant when I was much younger, and had that for over a decade. So I think growing up with two people that understood what it meant to work, what the values were, what the values of working municipal government, what the values of working in more of a private union sector, what the needs of people were, I think was a great advantage. And again, growing up in that house, knowing that my mother was a Republican, my father was a Democrat, you can imagine what a Thanksgiving dinner would be like.
Yes, I can.
Yeah. But in all honesty, the both of them shared one thing in our family, and that is the value of hard work, accountability, and basically really sticking up for people. That's the way we were taught, is that everybody deserves a voice. Everybody deserves that slice of dignity and understanding of what people need. I mean, if I always say it, if I could represent the people of this district, if I'm lucky enough to get elected, the way that my father represents the people in his union and the people that his job is to represent them, I think I'd be very lucky to be able to work that hard and do exactly what he does for his members. And that's how we grew up. You walk around, look at somebody. Another one was my grandfather, who was a really, you want to talk about a blue-collar guy, World War II veteran, sheet metal worker, always said to me walking out the door in the morning, anybody that wears a uniform, whether it's a police officer, a fireman, a nurse, a doctor, a sanitation worker, a custodian, they're putting on a uniform every day to go to work. And they're going to work to provide for their families, provide for their communities, provide to keep the house up and running, show them respect, treat them how you want to be treated, treat everybody the same, from the custodian up to the attorney. Everybody needs to be treated with dignity and respect. And I feel the same way about the people in my district that I hope to represent. And the people here on Long Island and in the state, they need to be treated with dignity and respect, and understand that there is accountability as an elected official, as a workforce. And I think if we go forward with that, and that's how we treat people, and that's how we look at things as elected officials, I think we'd all be better off.
Yeah, and Michael, that gets to one of your earlier points. When you talk about treating people with respect, the first step for an elected official is to say, I was put here to be the voice of the values of the people in my district. Not I am here for my own agenda, and just getting back to, the union household and talking about some of your history. It's one of the beautiful things about the labor movement is the expression, labor movement has no royalty. Everybody work their way up, right? There's no one who just, like their first job is to be a labor leader. Everybody starts working a job and working their way up and effectively representing people and getting, opportunities to effectively represent people more and more and more. And that's how you grow in the labor movement. And, I think that's, it teaches children something when you grow up in a labor household that maybe is missed when you're not.
No, I happen to agree with you. And again, like I was saying, it's growing up in that household. And to tell you the truth, it's one of the biggest things about my household was when my mother opened their own business, right? That takes a lot of guts. It takes a lot of money. It takes a lot of time to open your own business. And obviously, with everything going on these days with COVID and people struggling, understanding what it takes to go into a small business. But the biggest thing that I got out too with her was customer service, right? If you treat, again, it goes back to respect. You want to treat people like they're coming into your restaurant to eat. You treat them with customer service. They are there expecting a product, right? They want to get what they pay for. And to tell you the truth, that's no different than being an elected official. The residents, the taxpayers are paying your salary, right? I work for you, not the other way around. It's the same thing. If you could take that aspect of life into that also, I feel you'd be better off because, again, if you don't treat people with customer service when you have a restaurant or a small business, they're not going to come back. There are plenty of other people to go to. Same thing as a public official, right? If they don't want you, if you don't treat them with respect and do what you feel is right for the residents and listen to them, they can vote you out. And to tell you the truth, that's what we should be able to do. We as voters have that right to do that, and I think that's so important. And when I talked about local government and local elections, it's so important because they're the closest thing to you. And as an assemblyman, if I'm getting to that position, I want to be accountable to the residents. I want to be out amongst the residents, be able to talk to them, to speak to them, come to my office, come see me. I want to be, as I said before, a full-service assemblyman. I want to be able to be in the district with the people, understanding what's going on, being a part of the community, talking to the whether it's the baseball coach that, the guy that works all day and comes home and wants to coach his son's baseball, his daughter's softball team, or hockey, or whatever the case may be. Understand their needs, understand what goes on in the communities that I'm going to be representing so I could be out there with the people to understand what they need. And I think that's so important as opposed to sitting there going, all right, I'm an elected official. This is great. I'll send out some mail in 2 years and I'll walk around and hand out a flyer every now and then. I want to be there, be available for the people to understand I'm here for you. I work for you. I'm going to be your voice in Albany, and I think we need that.
So if you're just tuning in, my guest this morning is Michael Durso. He's a candidate for New York State's 9th Assembly District. And Michael, just, touching on, in light of everything that we've talked about, we also talked when you screened with us about some of your legislative priorities, and one of them was to reduce unfair taxation on the working class. So, maybe you can give us some idea of, what that means, and how you might approach that. Well,
and again, it's walking door to door, talking to people. It's amazing that despite everything that's going on in the world right now, whether it's anti-police legislation or the COVID issue, it's amazing how people always still say the same thing. I don't want to pay more in taxes. It's amazing, right? With everything that's going on,
yeah,
that ends up being one of the number one things that people are concerned about. So, unfair taxation on our working class could go to so many different things. Whether it's keeping your property tax at a level that you can afford, right? We have people leaving New York State in droves, right? And most of them are that, anywhere from 20 to 35, 40-year-old range. We need those people to stay here. And then for our seniors, the star rebates and the enhanced star rebates, being able to keep them in their homes, to stay here on the island. Because in all honesty, that tax base that comes out of that, if we lose that, then taxes, they want to raise taxes. Somebody's got to flick the bill. And to tell you the truth, we pay enough in taxes. We pay enough, especially as the middle class, We don't need those things going up, and that's some of the people's biggest concerns. Obviously, small businesses, they pay an exorbitant amount of taxes on their buildings, on their businesses, whether it's a payroll tax or whatever it needs to be. There needs to be some kind of tax breaks, especially now, getting some of these small businesses back up and running, whether it's a stimulus package that's being held up in Congress right now. But we need to get these things up and running, because otherwise the middle class is always the one that ends up flicking the bill. And we can't have that happening. So fighting for some of those things, keeping the property taxes at least at the level it is now. We can't have them going up. Bridging the gap for some of the small businesses to get them up and running again, give them a little incentive to stay here, keep moving forward, stay in our communities, because they're such a huge part of our communities. And filling those budget gaps. I mean, we have now what ends up being is over a $20 billion budget deficit in the state, which prior to COVID started at $6 billion. My problem is, and I have a problem with that when they talk about that, is what happened? Why are we so in debt to begin with? Where did that money go? And I need to figure those things out. Now, obviously, I'm not privy to some of that information, not being an elected official. But when I get in there, we need people, and again, like I've said prior, our elected officials to be more accountable for what they're doing, what they're voting on, what they're putting forth as legislation that's affecting Long Island, is affecting the middle class, and affecting our workforces here on the island.
That's very well said, Michael. And all around, I think those tuning in this morning can hear why AME stood behind you and endorsed you for your candidacy, and so many other working men and women, labor unions are standing behind you as well. And I want to thank you for carving time out of your day to speak with us and get us up to speed, and for all we hope you're going to do for the residents in the 9th District.
Oh, I really appreciate it. And again, I thank you for support. I thank the public, the private sector unions for their support. I thank the police for their support. We really need to get some people up in Albany that care about the residents, that care about the people, that care about our police, that care about our workforces in the counties and the towns, and give people of Long Island, people of New York State, that piece of dignity and that piece of the pie that they deserve.
Perfect. Thank you, Michael. Appreciate you, again, spending some time with us. And that was Michael Durso, candidate for the New York State 9th Assembly District. So my next guest is Peter Scully, and he is with the Suffolk County Executive's Office. And really, I guess the nickname you get is the Water Quality Czar. You have a long history in working on environmental issues throughout your entire career, and currently now in Suffolk County, just continuing those efforts. And I just wanted to jump in on, an issue that really, is very important, I think, to the taxpayers in Suffolk County, all of our residents, this solution as proposed is Proposition 2 on the ballot, and transferring dollars into the Taxpayer Stabilization Fund. What can you tell us about Proposition 2 just in general?
Sure. Well, I don't think it's any secret that the COVID-19 pandemic has wrought havoc on government at all levels. Not only has it created massive revenue deficits, it's also made it necessary for governments to incur significant new additional costs to protect public health and safety. And so governments, from a financial standpoint, state governments, county governments, find themselves in a situation where they're short on revenues and are faced with situations in which they would need to either significantly raise taxes, in our case property taxes, or significantly reduce services. And governments, therefore, are looking for solutions that will mitigate the impact on taxpayers of COVID-19 pandemic. So in the case of Suffolk County, the voters of Suffolk County have repeatedly voted in favor of using 0.25% of the county sales tax for a variety of purposes. The primary purpose is tax stabilization. And we have the flexibility, should the voters approve it, to reallocate some of the sales tax funding that is intended specifically for tax stabilization to better protect taxpayers of Suffolk County. What we have is an assessment stabilization reserve fund that was constructed for the specific purpose of stabilizing sewer taxes. So in that case, all residents of Suffolk County and all consumers in Suffolk County are paying into a fund that benefits only residents of the county sewer districts. And that's okay. It was constructed for that purpose. But in the face of the massive deficits that we're facing because of COVID, we have identified, and the legislature has identified, a significant surplus in the Assessment Stabilization Reserve Fund that can't be used for any other purpose, which, with voter approval, could be redirected to the Taxpayer Stabilization Fund in order to protect taxpayers against the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic. And that's the issue that is at the heart of Proposition number 2.
So basically, the idea is to take monies that are allocated for a specific purpose now, which is tax stabilization, but a very specific type of tax stabilization, and free leave enough in tax stabilization money for that very specific sewer stabilization taxation issue, and free up the excess funds to provide the services that government's mandated to provide to the residents, rather than going with call it a tax increase. You just basically, taking money out of an account that would otherwise not necessarily be used and use it to continue providing mandated government services.
Well, that's exactly right. And so what we have here is we have a fund we know is overfunded. We know it has significant revenue above what it needs to stabilize sewer taxes, and we know that funding is sitting there unused. We also know that we face unprecedented challenges dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic, and it's the frontline workers of Suffolk County who are getting us through. They've been heroic in helping us to deal with the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic, many of them working 12 to 14 hours per day for 4, 5, 6 months in a row. There is no way that it would be appropriate to, take out the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic on the back of this workforce.
No, listen, you don't have to tell me that one. Again, there is no bravery without fear, and if you know about COVID, you're afraid of COVID. That's the bottom line. So the bravery of the workforce and the dedication of the workforce stepping in and saying, where can I help? Things can't fail. Government can't fail. Where do you need me? What can I do? And that's been seen throughout this crisis. So at the end of the day, really, being familiar with this issue myself, voting yes on Prop 2 is a foregone conclusion. It's easy. But obviously, I have motivation that's different than yours in that, I'm a labor leader. I want to protect our members and their ability to provide services. Whereas you are, you have been a crusader for the environment throughout this process. So I'm going to ask a difficult question that maybe could make me look bad, but like from an environmental perspective, is this doing something wrong? I mean, I really want people to vote yes for this, but I have my motivation. But from an environmental perspective, from where you stand, is this a good measure?
Oh, absolutely. I think what we've been a little bit disappointed in is the way the measure has been mischaracterized by some who are opposing it, implying that it would divert funding that otherwise would be used for our clean water programs or our open space program. Those things simply are not true. This is a sewer tax stabilization fund. Its approval by the voters would protect voters from the impacts of COVID-19. If approved, it would not divert a single penny from the county's clean water programs. Those funds are segregated and protected. It would not divert a penny from the county's open space program. That funding is protected. So it's that kind of mischaracterization, which resonates with some voters, unfortunately, that we think is troubling. If you need to mislead the voters in order to get them to agree with your position, obviously, that's telling. It's clear that voting in favor of this measure would make the county better able to deal with the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic and better able to continue providing services without any significant tax increase.
So, at the end of the day, we're looking at something that protects the ability of the workforce to continue to provide government services that taxpayers bought and paid for. We're looking at something that has no adverse economic impact on any of the programs designed by government to protect the environment. and something that insulates the taxpayers from, potential rate increases. So, the downside isn't particularly clear to me. From my position, Prop 2 is a yes vote, on all levels.
Well, I think that's kind of a clear understanding of the purpose of the measure. It's a part of an overall solution. The county executive has been clear that Washington needs to act. Governors in all states have been saying the same thing. But here at Suffolk County, there are certain steps that we can take to make our job a little bit easier and protect taxpayers with measures that we can control. This is one of those measures. This is a common sense measure. At the end of the day, that's why it received the support of the Suffolk County legislature. And above all else, Dan, this allows the voters of Suffolk County to decide how those funds should be used, whether they be sitting there unused in a sewer tax stabilization fund, or whether, in light of the problems we face as a result of COVID, given the challenges we face, these funds should be used to protect taxpayers from service reductions and or tax increases. That's what this is about.
I completely agree. And you touched on another great point. This is not local government sitting back, although we understand that Washington needs to help. Local government here in Suffolk County is not saying we have no other solutions. We're just going to sit here. Options were being explored, and this measure is something that shows action on the part of Suffolk County government to, fix some of the problems that happened because of COVID with voter approval while Washington gets their act together.
And that's a very good point. Suffolk County has always been forward-leaning and trying to address significant problems. Suffolk County, in this instance, has identified solutions. This is just one of them. And letting the people of Suffolk County decide, above all else, is the American way. And that's why we're hopeful that people will see the value in the proposition.
So my guest this morning was Peter Scully with Suffolk County. Basically, again, I keep falling back to the sewer czar as your official title, although I know it's not that. And I appreciate you taking some time just to talk this stuff through. For our listeners out there, Proposition 2 is in your best interest. Look at it, read it, make your decision. But Peter, I really do appreciate you coming on and spending some time with us this morning to talk this through.
Thank you, Dan, and thank you to your members for all their hard work over the past 8 months.
I appreciate it. And to our listeners, we'll speak to you next week. Listeners will speak to you next week. Listeners will speak to you next week. Listeners will speak to you next week.